A poor girl, marked by hunger and dust, finds the strength to challenge a millionaire's workshop. Ridiculed for asking only for water in exchange for her knowledge, she does not back down. And she proves before everyone that true genius can be born where it is least expected. If this beautiful story of overcoming and love interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you are watching us from. The midday sun mercilessly punished the streets of Riverside, transforming the asphalt into a burning plate. Emily Wilson walked slowly down Engineers Avenue, her plastic sandals melting with each step. At 12 years old, she looked 8, due to malnutrition, but her brown eyes shone with an intelligence that contrasted with the faded and patched clothes she wore. It had been 3 days since she had drunk clean water. The last few sips had come from a broken public faucet downtown, and even then they tasted of rust and dirt. Her throat was parched, her cracked lips betraying the thirst that consumed her, but Emily continued walking. Not out of desperation, but out of curiosity. In the distance, she heard a sound that made her stop instantly. It was the hesitant roar of a powerful engine, but with flaws. Her trained ears immediately caught something that most people would ignore. This was not a common sound of an old car. It was the groan of a high-performance machine in distress. Following the sound like a human radar, Emily reached Premium Motors Auto Shop, a luxurious establishment that served only imported and high-cylinder cars. The mirrored facade reflected her thin and dirty image, creating a stark contrast with the elegance of the place. Several luxury vehicles were parked in the lot. A black BMW X6, a pearl-white Audi Q7, a metallic blue Mercedes-Benz GLS. But what really caught her attention was a black Porsche Cayenne Turbo S, with the hood raised and 3 mechanics around it, all with expressions of frustration. The engine was running, but the irregular roar and power cuts were evident even to someone who was meters away. Richard Morgan, the owner of the shop, was nervously gesturing while talking on the phone with the car's owner. Tall, 45 years old, always dressed in expensive polo shirts and a Swiss watch on his wrist, Richard had built his reputation by serving the elite of Riverside. At that moment, however, his reputation was at risk. "Dr. Frederick, I understand your urgency, but this problem is more complex than we thought," Richard said, trying to stay calm. "It's been 5 days and my team still hasn't been able to identify the defect. You need to understand that—" On the other end of the line, Frederick Andrews, a pharmaceutical industry businessman, made no secret of his irritation. He had paid $400,000 for that Porsche and needed it working perfectly for an important meeting with international investors the next day. Meanwhile, the shop's 3 mechanics, John, a 50-year-old man with 3 decades of experience, Carl, 35, specialized in automotive electronics, and Sarah, 28, the only woman on the team and a mechanical engineering graduate, were visibly frustrated. "John, we've tested everything," Carl muttered, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "Ignition system, fuel pump, filters, oxygen sensors, everything is working perfectly in the individual tests. But when the engine starts, it hesitates and loses power," added Sarah, analyzing the data from the scanner connected to the car. "It's as if there was an internal conflict that we can't map." John, the most experienced, shook his head negatively. In 30 years of profession, he had rarely encountered such a complex problem. The Porsche was a 2023 model, practically new with only 5,000 miles on it. It made no sense to present such strange defects. It was at that moment that Emily approached. Her steps were timid but determined. The girl positioned herself near the entrance to the shop, carefully observing the mechanic's work. Her eyes fixed on the exposed engine of the Porsche, and for a few seconds she just listened. The irregular roar, the sudden power cuts, the way the engine reacted when the mechanics accelerated, all of this created a pattern in Emily's mind, a pattern she had observed before in similar situations. "Excuse me," she said in a low voice, almost whispering. No one heard her. The mechanics continued debating among themselves, testing components and analyzing graphs on the computer. Richard was still on the phone, trying to calm the impatient customer. "Excuse me," Emily repeated a little louder. This time, Sarah noticed her. The engineer turned and saw the thin girl standing at the entrance to the shop. For a moment, Sarah felt a pang of compassion seeing the child's condition, but soon her expression changed to professional concern. "Sorry, but this is no place for children," Sarah said gently but firmly. It's dangerous here with the cars running and the tools. I know what's wrong with the car, interrupted Emily, pointing to the Porsche. The phrase made everyone stop. John dropped the screwdriver he was holding. Carl disconnected the scanner and looked at the girl with disbelief. Even Richard stopped talking on the phone for a few seconds. What did you say? Asked John with a mocking smile forming on his lips. I said I know what's wrong with the car, Emily repeated, now with a firmer voice. And I can fix it. Collective laughter was inevitable. John laughed loudly. Carl shook his head in disbelief. And even Sarah, despite her more compassionate nature, couldn't contain a skeptical smile. Richard, sensing the situation, quickly ended the call and approached the group. Look, little girl, said Richard with a condescending tone. This is a Porsche Cayenne Turbo S. It costs more than $400,000. It has a twin-turbo V8 engine, all-wheel drive system, complex electronics. Do you understand what that means? Emily stared him directly in the eyes without being intimidated. I understand it's an expensive car that's been having problems for 5 days, and you can't fix it. The silence was embarrassing. The girl's answer had been accurate and in a way humiliating for the team of professionals. And you think you can fix it? Asked Carl, crossing his arms with a challenging air. If you give me a glass of water, I'll show you, Emily simply replied. The proposal drew new laughter. The idea of a street girl solving a complex technical problem in exchange for a glass of water seemed too absurd to be taken seriously. Water, repeated John, still laughing. You want just water to fix a $500,000 Porsche? Not $500,000, Emily corrected automatically. 400,000, as you yourself said. And yes, I just want water. I'm thirsty. Sarah watched the scene with growing discomfort. There was something in the girl's posture, in the way she talked about the car, that didn't seem typical of an ordinary child. But at the same time, the situation was so unusual that she didn't know how to react. Richard, on the other hand, saw an opportunity for entertainment. The girl's presence could make a good story to tell customers, maybe even a viral video for the shop's social media. All right, little girl, he said, taking out his cell phone. Let's do this. If you can tell us what's wrong with the car, I'll give you not just water, but a sandwich too. But if you're wrong, you leave here and don't come back. And all this will be filmed, to show what kind of experts show up here. Sarah made a face of disapproval but said nothing. John and Carl exchanged glances, anticipating the moment of fun at the girl's expense. Emily nodded, agreeing to the terms. Can I approach the car? You can, said Richard, already recording with his phone. But don't touch anything. The girl approached the Porsche with measured steps. First, she just stood next to the engine, listening carefully. The car was idling, with the irregular roar that had been intriguing the mechanics for days. After a few seconds, Emily bent down and observed the engine in detail. She didn't touch any parts, but her eyes scanned each visible component with surgical precision. Then she walked to the side of the vehicle and positioned herself near the fuel tank, again just listening. What are you doing? Asked Carl impatiently. Listening, Emily answered without losing concentration. After a few minutes of silent observation, the girl returned to the team. The problem isn't with the engine, she said with confidence. It's in the electronic fuel management system. We've already tested that, retorted Carl. All the sensors are working normally. The sensors are working, agreed Emily, but there's a signal conflict between the fuel rail, pressure sensor and the electronic control unit. The system is interpreting a false reading of excessive pressure and activating the protection mode, limiting fuel injection. The silence that followed was different from the previous laughter. This time there was something disturbing about the technical precision of the girl's explanation. John, the most experienced mechanic, frowned. What do you mean, signal conflict? The sensor is sending correct data, but the frequency of the signal is slightly misaligned with what the central unit expects to receive, explained Emily, as if she were talking about something obvious. It's probably a software defect, not hardware. That's why all individual tests are normal, but the set doesn't work harmoniously. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. The explanation was technically solid and extremely specific. It wasn't the kind of knowledge a child would casually acquire. And how do you know this? Asked Sarah, her voice laden with genuine curiosity. Emily looked at her for a few seconds before answering. Because I've seen it before. Not exactly in this model, but in similar systems. Where? Insisted Sarah. The girl hesitated as if deciding how much she should reveal. In other places. Richard, who until then had been focused on filming what he hoped would be a comical situation, began to feel uncomfortable. The conversation had taken a turn he hadn't expected, and the possibility of the girl actually being right about the diagnosis made him nervous. "Very well, little doctor," he said with forced sarcasm. "If you're so sure, how do you propose we solve this supposed signal conflict?" Emily pointed to the diagnostic equipment connected to the car. "First, you need to access the adaptive parameters of the electronic control unit and do a complete reset. Then, recalibrate the pressure sensor reading with the engine at working temperature. The specific procedure is in Porsche's technical bulletin, TSB 2023-05-17. The mention of the specific number of the technical bulletin made Sarah's eyes widen. Only authorized shops and specialized engineers had access to this detailed technical information. Carl, skeptical but curious, approached the diagnostic computer. "I'll check if this technical bulletin actually exists," he muttered, typing into the system. A few seconds later, he looked at his colleagues with an incredulous expression. "The bulletin exists, and it deals exactly with the problem she described." The impact of the revelation was immediate. John dropped the tool he was holding, Sarah covered her mouth with her hands in surprise, and Richard stopped recording, with the phone trembling slightly in his hand. "How do you know this bulletin?" asked Sarah, her voice almost inaudible. Emily just shrugged. "I read it somewhere." "Where?" insisted Sarah. "I don't remember exactly," replied the girl, avoiding direct eye contact, "but I could be wrong. Maybe you should test it to make sure." The suggestion hung in the air like a silent challenge. The team looked at each other, divided between professional skepticism and growing curiosity about that extraordinary girl. Carl was the first to break the tense silence that had settled in the shop. With hesitant movements, he went to the diagnostic computer and began navigating the technical menus, following exactly the instructions Emily had provided. "I'm going to access the adaptive parameters," he muttered, more to himself than to others. His fingers danced across the keyboard with precision, but his usual confidence had been shaken by the girl's accurate words. Sarah approached, observing every movement on the screen. As an engineer, she understood the technical complexity of what they were doing. The procedure Emily had described required not only deep knowledge of mechanics, but of advanced automotive electronics. John remained standing, arms crossed, trying to process what had happened. In 3 decades of profession, he had never witnessed anything like this. A street child demonstrating technical knowledge that rivaled that of specialized engineers. Richard put his phone in his pocket, his original intention of filming a moment of humor having transformed into something completely different. He looked at Emily with a mixture of curiosity and fear, as if she were a puzzle he couldn't solve. "Found it," said Carl, pointing to the screen. "The adaptive parameters are indeed misaligned. The pressure sensor tolerance is 0.3 bar above the factory standard." Sarah leaned over to see better. That would explain the engine's erratic behavior. The control unit is interpreting excessive pressure when it's actually normal. But how did she know this just by listening to the engine? Asked John, incredulous. Emily, who had remained quiet during the verification, finally spoke. "The sound an engine makes when there's a signal conflict is different from when there's a mechanical problem. It's more irregular, as if it were hesitating, not knowing what to do." "And what else do you hear in cars?" asked Sarah, genuinely fascinated. The girl looked at the other vehicles in the shop before answering. Her eyes fixed on the black BMW X6 parked at the back of the yard. "That car there," she said, pointing. "It has a problem with the power steering pump. It's probably making a high-pitched noise when the steering wheel is turned completely to one side." Richard felt a chill in his stomach. The BMW belonged to a customer who had brought the vehicle in the previous week with exactly that problem. The replacement part was still being imported from Germany. "And the Audi?" asked Sarah, testing. Emily observed the white Q7 for a few seconds. Air suspension system, with a slow leak in the right rear shock absorber. The car must be a little lower on that side when it stays parked for a long time. Again, the analysis was correct. John walked to the Audi and observed that indeed, the right rear side was slightly lower than the rest of the vehicle. "This isn't possible," he muttered. "How can you see all this?" "I don't see," Emily corrected. "I observe. It's different." Carl had finished the reset procedure on the Porsche and was recalibrating the sensors according to the girl's instructions. "Done," he announced. "Let's test it." He started the Cayenne's engine, and for the first time in 5 days, the roar came out perfectly uniform and powerful. There was no more hesitation, no more power cuts. The twin-turbo V8 was singing in perfect harmony. "My God," whispered John, "she actually did it." Sarah was speechless. In her 5 years of mechanical engineering training and 3 years of practical experience, she had never witnessed such a precise diagnosis made in such an intuitive way. Richard, for his part, felt deeply uncomfortable. His elite shop had been outdone by a hungry and poorly dressed girl. This made no sense in his world, where technical knowledge was directly related to expensive diplomas and sophisticated equipment. "All right," he said, trying to regain some authority. "You got it right this time, congratulations, now take your water and leave." But Sarah intervened. "Wait, Richard. We can't just ignore what happened here." "Nothing much happened," he retorted defensively. "It was just luck." "I guess that worked out." "Luck?" Carl turned to his boss with indignation. "She cited a specific Porsche technical bulletin, diagnosed 3 different cars just by observing. That's not luck, it's knowledge." Emily listened to the discussion in silence, but her eyes shone with a sadness that went beyond physical hunger. It was hunger for recognition, for belonging, for being seen as more than just a street child. "How did you learn all this?" asked Sarah, kneeling to be at the girl's height. Her voice was gentle, maternal. Emily hesitated again. "My father." "Your father what?" encouraged Sarah. "My father worked with cars," she said simply. Before he left. He was a mechanic?" asked John, approaching. "He was an engineer," replied Emily, almost whispering. "Development engineer at Ford. He worked creating new engines, testing electronic systems." The revelation completely changed the atmosphere in the shop. Suddenly, everything started to make sense. The girl's technical knowledge hadn't come from nowhere. It was heritage of blood and coexistence. "And where is he now?" asked Sarah, although she feared the answer. "He left when I was 4, said Emily, using the common euphemism of children to avoid the word that hurts. "Car accident." Ironic, isn't it? The silence that followed was laden with compassion. Even Richard, with all his business rigidity, felt a tightness in his chest. "And your mother?" continued Sarah. "She couldn't handle the sadness. Started drinking a lot, lost her job, lost the house. One day she went out to buy medicine and never came back." Emily told her story with painful naturalness, as if she were talking about the weather. "Since then I've lived on the street." "How long?" asked Carl, his voice choked. 8 years, she answered. "Since I was 4. The math was cruel. A 12-year-old girl had spent 2/3 of her life on the streets, but somehow had preserved and developed the technical knowledge inherited from her father." "How did you manage to learn so much living on the streets?" asked John. "I would observe in auto shops," explained Emily. "At first the owners would throw me out, but I always came back. I would stay outside listening, memorizing. Some kinder mechanics would let me stay close while they worked. I never got in the way, just observed and asked questions." "And you remember everything you see?" asked Sarah. "I remember everything that has to do with cars," she confirmed. "It's as if my brain stores this information in a special way. My dad always said I had an engineer's ear." Sarah stood up and turned to Richard. "We can't let this girl go back to the streets. Do you realize the talent we have here?" "Sarah, be realistic," said Richard, lowering his voice. "She's a minor. She's in a vulnerable situation. If we bring her to work here, we'll have problems with Child Protective Services, with the IRS. I'm not talking about formal work," interrupted Sarah. "I'm talking about social responsibility, about giving an opportunity to someone who clearly has extraordinary potential." Carl joined the conversation. "Sarah is right. We can't pretend we didn't see what she's capable of doing." John, still processing everything, made a disturbing observation. "Did you notice that she not only diagnosed the problems, but knew exactly how to solve them? This goes beyond theoretical knowledge. It's practical experience." The observation made everyone look at Emily with even more curiosity. How did a street child acquire practical experience with luxury cars? "Emily," said Sarah, approaching again, "have you ever worked in a shop?" "Not exactly worked," she replied, hesitant. "But sometimes I help some mechanics in exchange for food. Nothing very important, just organizing tools, cleaning parts." "What kind of help?" insisted Sarah. "Well," Emily looked at the floor, "sometimes they would let me test some simple diagnostics. They said I was good at it." "Where?" asked John. "In various shops around the city, but always informally. When the owner arrived, I would disappear." The story was becoming increasingly complex. Emily wasn't just a child with theoretical knowledge inherited from her father. She had developed real practical experience, even if in a clandestine and precarious way. "Richard," said Sarah, turning to her boss with determination, "I'm going to take this girl home today. She's going to take a shower, eat a decent meal, sleep in a clean bed, and tomorrow we're going to talk about what to do." "Sarah, you can't just—" began Richard. "I can and I will," she cut him off. "If you don't want to get involved, that's your problem. But I'm not going to let this child go back to the street after what we witnessed today." Carl immediately supported her. "I'll help too. We can organize something." John, more pragmatic, asked the difficult question, "What if she doesn't want to? She's been used to life on the streets for 8 years. She might not want to change." Everyone looked at Emily, who had followed the entire discussion in silence. Her expression was a mixture of hope and fear, as if she very much wanted to accept the help, but was afraid of being disappointed again. "Emily," said Sarah gently, "would you like to spend the night in a real house? With a hot shower, food, and a bed?" The girl looked at each of them before answering, as if assessing whether she could trust them. Finally, she nodded her head, an almost imperceptible movement but loaded with meaning. "Yes," she said, her voice choked. "I would like that very much." At that moment, without anyone fully realizing it, a transformation was beginning that would change not only Emily's life, but the lives of everyone who witnessed her extraordinary talent. What seemed to be just an act of charity would become something much bigger, a journey of discovery, recognition, and realization of a potential that the world was not yet prepared to fully understand. Sarah lived in a simple but cozy apartment in the Ridgewood neighborhood, 15 minutes from the shop. During the car journey, Emily remained silent, looking out the window at the houses, buildings, and people passing by. Her eyes captured every detail with the same intensity with which she analyzed engines. "Are you nervous?" asked Sarah, noticing the girl's tension. "A little," admitted Emily. "It's been a long time since I've been in a real house." "When was the last time?" asked Sarah gently. "I was 6. A family let me stay for 3 days during a very strong storm. But when the rain stopped, I had to leave." The answer squeezed Sarah's heart. It was hard to imagine a 6-year-old child facing the streets alone, but Emily spoke about it with a naturalness that revealed how she had gotten used to this reality. When they arrived at the apartment, Sarah prepared a hot bath for Emily, while she set aside some clothes that might fit. They were pieces she had kept from when she was younger, still in her late teens. "The bathroom is there," said Sarah, pointing. "Clean towels are in the cabinet. Shampoo and soap are in the shower. Make yourself at home." Emily looked at the bathroom door as if it were the entrance to another world. "Can I really use everything?" "Yes, of course. And don't worry about time. Relax, enjoy the hot water." While Emily was showering, Sarah called Carl. "You won't believe what I discovered," she said as soon as he answered. "What?" "I asked Emily to tell me more about her father as we were coming home. He wasn't just a Ford engineer, Carl, he was Edward Wilson." "Edward Wilson?" Carl repeated the name, trying to remember where he had heard it. Edward Wilson, the engineer who developed the project for Ford's National EcoBoost engine. The one who pioneered the adaptation of turbo engine technologies for American fuel. On the other end of the line, Carl was silent for a few seconds. Edward Wilson was a legend in the American automotive industry. His work on engine optimization for ethanol was studied in engineering universities. "Are you sure?" asked Carl, incredulous. "She showed me a picture she carries in her wallet. An old and faded picture, but I recognized the face from the articles I read about him in college." "Sarah, do you realize what this means?" Edward Wilson was considered a genius. If Emily really inherited that talent. She didn't just inherit the talent, Carl. She lived with him during the first 4 years of her life. Edward must have taught her things. even if she was too young to understand at the time. While they were talking, Emily came out of the shower and dressed in the clothes Sarah had set aside. For the first time in years, she saw herself in the mirror clean, with proper clothes, really looking like a normal 12-year-old girl. "Sarah," she called from the living room, "I'll be right there." Sarah ended the call with Carl and went to the living room where she found Emily standing in front of a bookshelf full of technical books on automotive engineering. "Did you read all these books?" asked Emily, her eyes shining with interest. "Most of them, yes. It's part of the profession." Emily picked up one of the books, Advanced Automotive Electronic Systems, and began leafing through the pages. Her expressions changed as she read, as if she were recognizing familiar concepts. "Do you understand any of it?" asked Sarah. "Some things," said Emily, pointing to a complex diagram about electronic injection. "My dad explained these drawings to me when I was little. He said they were like maps of the hearts of cars." Sarah felt a shiver. The way Emily referred to technical concepts revealed an emotional intimacy with knowledge, not just intellectual. "Emily, do you remember other things your father taught you?" The girl closed the book and sat on the couch. "I remember he always said I had a special gift, that I could hear cars in a way that other people couldn't." "And do you believe that?" "I don't know if it's a gift or just because I learned to pay attention," said Emily, shrugging her shoulders. "In the streets, you learn to observe everything, because any detail can be important for your survival." Sarah prepared dinner, while Emily continued exploring the books. It was fascinating to observe how the girl absorbed complex technical information with naturalness, but at the same time demonstrated the ingenuity typical of a child in normal social situations. During dinner, Sarah asked questions about Emily's life on the streets, trying to understand how she had survived and developed her skills. "Where did you sleep?" asked Sarah. "It depended on the place and the time of year," replied Emily, slowly chewing the first hot meal in days. "Sometimes under store awnings, sometimes in vacant lots. In winter, I would look for enclosed places like parking lots of abandoned buildings. And food? The leftovers from restaurants. Sometimes people on the street would give me something. When I helped in some shop, the mechanics would share their lunch with me." "How many different shops did you frequent?" Emily stopped eating and thought. "Many, about 20, maybe more. But in some I would stay for just a few hours before being expelled." "And which was the shop where you learned the most?" "Mr. Anthony's in West Side," she said, smiling for the first time since arriving at the apartment. "He was very patient. He would let me stay watching for hours, explain some things, give me small tasks like organizing screws or cleaning tools." "Is Mr. Anthony still working there?" "I don't know. It's been over a year since I've been there." Sarah mentally noted the name and location. Perhaps it would be interesting to find this Anthony and discover more about Emily's development. After dinner, Sarah prepared the couch as a bed for Emily. It was a comfortable couch, but even so, infinitely better than any place where the girl had slept in recent years. "Sarah," said Emily when they were getting ready to sleep, "can I ask you a question?" "Sure. Why are you doing this?" "Why are you helping me?" Sarah sat on the edge of the couch thinking about the answer. "Because I recognize talent when I see it, and because I think everyone deserves an opportunity to show what they're capable of. But you barely know me. I don't need to have known you for years to know that you're special. Emily, what you did today at the shop, that's not normal. It's extraordinary." Emily was quiet for a few moments. "What if I can't keep up? What if it was just luck, like your boss said?" "Then we'll find out together," said Sarah. "But I'm sure it's not luck. I'm sure you have a real talent and we're going to find a way to develop it. How? I don't know exactly yet. But we'll figure it out. First, we're going to get you into school." "Can you read and write?" "I can read well, write more or less," said Emily. "I learned on my own reading street signs, newspapers thrown in the trash, abandoned technical manuals." "Impressive. And mathematics?" "The basics. Addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. But when it comes to car measurements, then I feel more comfortable. I can convert millimeters to inches in my head, calculate power, torque, those things." Sarah shook her head amazed. "Tomorrow I'm going to talk to some people. We'll see what kind of opportunities exist for someone with your profile." "What people?" "I know some professors at the engineering college where I studied, and maybe we can contact people in the automotive industry. Someone who really understands what you're capable of. Emily snuggled on the couch, pulling the blanket up to her chin. Sarah, yes? Thank you. It's been a long time since anyone believed in me. Don't worry. From today on, you're not alone anymore. While Emily fell asleep, Sarah stayed awake planning the next steps. She knew it wouldn't be simple. There were legal issues involving a minor in a vulnerable situation, educational issues about how to integrate a child who had spent years outside the school system, and practical issues about how to support and educate someone with such specific needs. But Sarah also knew that she had witnessed something rare that day: pure talent, intuitive knowledge, a natural connection with complex technology that could not be wasted. The next morning, Sarah woke up early and found Emily already awake, leafing through the technical books again. "Did you sleep well?" asked Sarah. "It was the best night's sleep in years," replied Emily, smiling. "And I think I understood some new things in this book about automatic transmissions." Sarah prepared breakfast while calling Carl, putting the cell phone on speaker. "How was the night?" asked Carl as soon as he answered. "Peaceful. And you won't believe it. She spent the morning reading my engineering books and is understanding concepts that college students have difficulty comprehending." "Speaking of which," said Carl, "I have news. Last night I researched more about Edward Wilson on the internet. I found some old articles and discovered something interesting." "What?" asked Sarah and Emily at the same time. "Edward was developing a revolutionary project before he passed, something about artificial intelligence applied to automotive diagnostics. The project was never completed because he didn't have time to finish it." Sarah and Emily looked at each other. "Carl, do you think—" "I think Emily may have inherited not only her father's technical knowledge, but also the intuition for diagnostics that he was trying to artificially replicate." The revelation brought a new dimension to Emily's talent. It wasn't just inherited knowledge, it was the natural continuation of pioneering work that had been tragically interrupted. "Emily," said Sarah, "what do you think about visiting the university today? I want you to meet some professors." "Will they want to test me?" asked Emily with a mixture of anxiety and excitement. "Maybe, but don't worry. They won't judge you. They'll try to better understand your abilities. And then we'll find out what's the best way to develop your talent. Formal education, specialized courses, maybe even opportunities in the industry." Emily closed the book and looked at Sarah with determination. "I want to try. I want to see how far I can go." And so began a new phase in Emily Wilson's life. No longer the invisible girl from the streets, but a young prodigy about to discover that her talent could open doors she had never dreamed existed. Riverside State University was busy that Tuesday morning. Sarah had managed to schedule a meeting with Professor Richard Fontaine, one of the most respected automotive engineering specialists in the country, and a former colleague of Edward Wilson. "Are you nervous?" asked Sarah to Emily as they walked across the campus. "A little," admitted Emily, observing the imposing buildings around. "I've never been to a university before. Everything will be fine. Professor Richard is a very kind person, and he knew your father." Emily stopped abruptly. "He knew my father?" "Yes, they worked together on some Ford projects about 10 years ago. I thought it would be interesting for you two to meet." Emily's eyes filled with tears. It was the first time in 8 years that she would have the opportunity to talk with someone who had professionally interacted with Edward Wilson. Professor Richard's office was on the 3rd floor of the engineering building. The walls were covered with diplomas, certificates, and photos of racing cars. On the desk, several automotive component prototypes and stacks of scientific articles. "Sarah," said Professor Richard, standing up to greet them. He was a man in his early 50s, graying hair, glasses, and a warm smile. "And you must be Emily." "Yes, sir," she replied timidly. "Please sit down. Sarah told me some things over the phone, but I confess I was skeptical. Not out of malice, but because what she described seems, well, extraordinary." Sarah smiled. "That's why I brought Emily here, so you could personally evaluate." "Before anything," said the professor, addressing Emily, "I want you to know that I knew and greatly admired your father. Edward was brilliant, a true visionary." Emily lowered her eyes, moved. "Can you tell me what he was like at work?" "Your father was meticulous, creative, and had impressive technical intuition. He could identify problems in projects just by looking at the technical drawings. He said he heard the engines even before they were built. He said that at home too, said Emily, smiling through tears. He said that engines had their own personality. Exactly. And apparently that ability was passed on to you. The professor leaned back in his chair. Sarah told me about the diagnosis you made yesterday. Can you explain to me how you managed to identify the problem? Emily took a deep breath before answering. Well, when I heard the Porsche's engine, I noticed that the roar wasn't consistent. It wasn't a mechanical problem, because mechanical problems make more constant sounds. It was more like the car was confused, undecided. Interesting analogy, continue. Then I thought about the possible causes of inconsistency. It could be ignition, injection, or electronic management. But the hesitation pattern suggested data conflict, not component failure. Professor Richard made some notes. And how did you arrive at the specific diagnosis of the pressure sensor? By the sound the engine made when they tried to accelerate. It was like it wanted to give power, but something was preventing it. This is typical of protection system activated by incorrect reading of fuel pressure. And the technical bulletin you cited? Emily hesitated. I read it on a computer at a shop where I helped a few months back. The mechanic left it open while he went to lunch. I memorized the number because I found it interesting. The professor stood up and went to a shelf, taking a laptop. Emily, would you mind taking a small test with me? What kind of test? I'm going to show some videos of engines running. I want you to tell me what you notice in each one. The first video showed a V6 engine in operation. Emily listened carefully for a few seconds. Spark plug with incorrect gap in cylinder number 3, she said with confidence. The professor checked his notes. Correct. How did you know which specific cylinder? By the sequence of the failures. The engine has a specific ignition order, and the failure follows that pattern. The second video showed a diesel engine. Emily frowned, concentrating. Injection system with a problem in the injector nozzle. Probably partial clogging. Right again. And this one? The third video was more complex. Emily listened for longer before answering. This one is more difficult. It seems to be a hybrid engine, with a problem in the transition between combustion engine and electric motor. The system is not correctly synchronizing the two power sources. Professor Richard looked at Sarah with amazement. Emily, this is a video of an experimental prototype that we developed here at the university. Only a few specialists in the world would be able to identify this specific problem. Did I get it wrong? Asked Emily, concerned. No, you got it completely right. And that is, well, too impressive to be coincidence. Sarah smiled, satisfied. I told you she was special. The professor stood up and began to walk around the room, thoughtful. Emily, are you interested in studying engineering formally? I would like to, but I don't even have a complete elementary education, she replied, discouraged. Those are just bureaucratic details that can be solved, said the professor, waving his hand. What matters is the potential you demonstrate. What are you suggesting? Asked Sarah. I'm suggesting that we do a case study with Emily. We'll formally assess her skills, document her knowledge, and see if we can create a specific educational program for her. Is that possible? Asked Emily, her eyes shining. With your talent, anything is possible, replied the professor. But I'll be honest, it will be a challenging path. You'll have to study a lot, learn not just the technical things you already know intuitively, but also advanced mathematics, physics, chemistry. I want to learn, said Emily with determination. I want to understand not only how cars work, but why they work that way. Perfect. Then let's start immediately. The professor picked up the phone. I'm going to call some colleagues from the department. I want more people to evaluate your skills. In the next 2 hours, Emily was introduced to 5 different professors, each one a specialist in a specific area of automotive engineering. All were impressed not only with her technical knowledge, but with her ability to make intuitive connections between complex concepts. Professor Mark, a specialist in automotive electronics, tested Emily with circuit diagrams. She was able to identify flaws in systems that undergraduate students would take hours to understand. Professor Dr. Lucy, a materials specialist, presented problems about fatigue and resistance of components. Emily didn't know the exact mathematical calculations, but her intuition about which materials would fail first was always correct. Professor John, a specialist in combustion engines, was particularly impressed when Emily explained how different types of fuel affected engine performance, using simple but technically accurate analogies. "It's as if she had a complete technical library in her head," he commented to his colleagues. "But not just memorized data. She understands the relationships between the concepts." At the end of the morning, the professors gathered to discuss Emily's case. "In 40 years of career, I've never seen anything like it," said Professor Richard. "She has applied knowledge of a senior engineer but without formal academic training. The question is, how do we educate someone like this?" asked Professor Lucy. "Conventional methods don't apply. We have to create a personalized program," suggested Professor Mark, "something that recognizes the knowledge she already possesses and fills only the theoretical gaps." Sarah and Emily waited for the result of the discussion in the university cafeteria. Emily was excited but anxious, knowing that conversation could define her future. "Sarah," she said, stirring the juice she had ordered, "what if they decide I'm not suited for this?" "That won't happen," replied Sarah with conviction. "You saw how everyone reacted. You're special, Emily, they recognize that." After an hour of discussion, Professor Richard came to them in the cafeteria. "Emily," he said, sitting at the table, "we've reached a decision. We want to offer you a unique opportunity." "What kind of opportunity?" she asked, her heart racing. "A personalized study program. You'll work directly with our professors on real projects, while simultaneously taking the basic courses you need to formalize your knowledge." "Does this mean I can study here?" asked Emily, incredulous. "More than that. You'll be our first student in an experimental competency-based education program. We'll document your development, and if all goes well, you'll be able to graduate in automotive engineering in less time than a traditional student." Emily looked at Sarah with tears in her eyes. "Is this real?" "It's very real," replied Sarah, also moved. "You've earned this with your talent. But there are some conditions," continued the professor. "First, you need to be legally regulated. Sarah has already talked to me about this, and we'll help with the necessary documentation. Second, you'll live with a host family while you study. Third, in addition to technical studies, you'll have reinforcement classes in mathematics, English, history, and other basic subjects." "I accept everything," said Emily quickly. "Any condition I accept. And there's one more thing," said the professor, smiling. "We're going to contact some automobile companies. We want industry professionals to meet you. There may be interesting opportunities." "What kind of opportunities?" "Internships, research projects, maybe even partnerships. But let's take it easy. First, you need to adapt to academic life." That afternoon, going back home, Emily was silent, processing everything that had happened. "What are you thinking?" asked Sarah. "I'm thinking that 12 hours ago I was just an invisible girl living on the streets," she replied. "And now? Now I have the chance to become a real engineer. You were always special, Emily. Just no one had given you the opportunity to show it." "Sarah." "Yes?" "Thank you. For everything. For believing in me when I didn't even believe in myself." "You don't need to thank me. You did all the hard part yourself. I just opened the door." Emily smiled, looking out the car window. For the first time in 8 years, she had a future ahead of her. And it wasn't just a future, it was a bright future, full of possibilities she had never dreamed could exist. The girl who had asked for just a glass of water was about to discover that the world was thirsty for her talent. 3 months had passed since the first encounter at the shop, and Emily's life had completely changed. She now lived with the Olsen family. Robert, a public school physics teacher, his wife Carla, a child psychologist, and their 2 children, Brian, 15 years old, and Sophie, 10 years old. The adaptation hadn't been easy. Emily had frequent nightmares in the first weeks, waking up startled, expecting to be back on the streets. Carla, with her professional experience, helped the girl process the traumas and fears accumulated over years of abandonment. "How do you feel today?" asked Carla during one of their informal therapy sessions in the house garden. "Better," replied Emily, observing the plants. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real, that I won't wake up under an awning tomorrow." "These feelings are normal," explained Carla gently. "You spent 8 years in survival mode. Your brain needs time to adapt to stability." Brian, the oldest son, had initially felt displaced with Emily's arrival, but soon discovered that she was a fascinating companion, especially when the subject involved technology. "Emily, can you explain to me why my motorcycle is making that weird noise?" he asked one day after arriving from school. "What kind of noise?" asked Emily, raising her eyes from the calculus book she was studying at the kitchen table. "It's like a metallic click when I accelerate." "Probably the chain is loose or the crown teeth are worn," she responded automatically. "I can take a look if you want." In a few minutes, Emily had diagnosed and explained how to solve the problem with Brian's motorcycle. The Olsen family quickly got used to having their own technical consultant at home. At the university, Emily's progress was impressive. Professor Richard had created a study schedule that mixed basic subjects with advanced practical projects. In the morning, she attended classes in mathematics, physics, and English, adapted to her level. In the afternoon, she worked in the engine laboratory with graduate students. "Emily," said Professor Richard one Tuesday, "I want to introduce you to Professor Dr. Michael Sanders from Chicago University. He's developing a project on predictive diagnostics in hybrid engines and would like to meet you." Dr. Michael Sanders was an imposing man, in his 60s, with an international reputation in automotive engineering. He had flown specifically from Chicago to meet Emily. After hearing reports about her abilities, "So you're the young prodigy I've heard so much about," he said, observing Emily with scientific curiosity. "I just do what I learned by observing," she replied modestly. "Sarah told me that you mentioned your father's work on predictive diagnostics. Do you really understand the concepts behind this technology?" Emily thought for a moment before answering. "My father explained that in the future, cars would be able to identify problems before they even happened, by analyzing operating patterns. Like a doctor who identifies a disease by the symptoms before it gets serious." "Excellent analogy," said Dr. Michael, impressed. "And do you think you would be able to contribute to this kind of research?" "I would like to try," replied Emily. "I've always had an easy time perceiving when something was about to give problem, even if it was still functioning." Dr. Michael turned to Professor Richard. "I would like to invite Emily to participate in our project as a junior consultant, obviously adapting the responsibilities to her age and educational situation." "What kind of work would I do?" asked Emily, excited. "You would analyze audio recordings of engines at different stages of wear, identifying patterns that our algorithms still can't capture. Your intuition could help us train artificial intelligence more efficiently." The invitation represented a unique opportunity. Emily would be the first minor to officially participate in a research project of that level at Chicago University. Meanwhile, at Premium Motors Auto Shop, things had changed drastically. Emily's story had leaked on social media, initially through a video that Sarah posted showing the moment when the girl had diagnosed the Porsche. The video quickly went viral. In a week, it had more than 2 million views and had been shared by automotive company profiles, technology influencers, and even television programs. Richard, who had initially tried to capitalize on Emily's fame, soon discovered that the situation had gotten out of his control. Criticism about how he had treated the girl began to appear in the comments, and some important customers cancelled contracts with the shop. "Richard, we need to talk," said John, the most experienced mechanic, on a Monday morning. "Carl and I are thinking about leaving the shop." "Because of the girl?" asked Richard defensively. "Because of how you treated the girl," corrected Carl, "and because of how you're trying to take advantage of the situation now." Premium Motors was facing a reputation crisis. Meanwhile, Sarah had been promoted to technical manager at a competing shop, which hired her specifically for her association with the discovery of Emily's talent. But the most important moment in Emily's life came when she received an unexpected invitation. Laura Matthews, Human Resources Director at Toyota America, had traveled from Fairfield to Riverside specifically to meet her. "Emily," said Laura, seated in the Olsens' living room, "our company has been following your development through the university professors. We want to make a proposal." "What kind of proposal?" asked Emily, nervous. "We're creating a scholarship program for young talents. If you accept, Toyota will fund all your university studies, provide a personal mentor from our engineering team, and guarantee a paid internship position in our factory during vacations." Robert and Carla looked at each other, impressed. It was an opportunity that could completely transform Emily's future. And what would I have to do in return? Asked Emily, always cautious after years of mistrust. Just continue studying and developing yourself, replied Laura. And when you graduate, consider working with us. But without formal obligation, it's an investment in your potential. Can I think about it? Of course. But don't take too long. We have other candidates interested in the program, although none with such a unique profile as yours. That night, Emily talked at length with the Olsen family about the proposal. It was an extraordinary opportunity, but it also represented a huge responsibility. What do you think, Emily? Asked Robert. Is this what you want for your future? I want to work with cars, that I know, she replied. But sometimes I'm afraid that people expect too much from me. Fear is normal, said Carla, but it can't be what determines your choices. You have a rare gift, and using that gift to do something positive in the world is a responsibility, but also a privilege. Sophie, the youngest daughter, who had become like a sister to Emily, gave her opinion with the typical simplicity of a 10-year-old child. I think you should accept. You're the smartest person I know, and it would be cool if you invented cars that don't pollute the air. Sophie's observation touched Emily deeply. During her years on the streets, she had been invisible to society. Now she had the opportunity to use her talent to contribute to something bigger. I'm going to accept, she said finally. But I want one condition. What condition? Asked Robert. I want to continue helping other children like me, children who live on the streets, who have potential but no one believes in them. The family smiled, proud of Emily's maturity and generosity. The next day, she called Laura Matthews and accepted Toyota's proposal. The news spread quickly through academic and automotive industry circles. Emily Wilson, the girl who had asked for just a glass of water in exchange for her knowledge, now had one of the largest automakers in the world investing in her future. A week later, during a visit to Toyota's factory in Fairfield, Emily was introduced to Hiroshi Tanaka, the Japanese chief engineer responsible for developing hybrid engines in North America. Emily-san, he said in English with a Japanese accent, I have heard impressive stories about your abilities. Would you like to take a test? What kind of test? Asked Emily. Hiroshi took her to a restricted area of the factory where there was a hybrid engine prototype still in development. The engine was running, but there was a problem that the team of engineers hadn't been able to solve for weeks. This engine has an anomalous vibration at certain RPMs, explained Hiroshi. Our equipment detects the vibration, but we can't identify the cause. Would you like to try? Emily approached the engine and listened for a few minutes. Then she asked to see the engine support system and the connections between the electric motor and the combustion engine. The problem is not in the engines, she said after the analysis. It's in the synchronization between the two power systems. There's a microscopic delay in the transition between electric motor and combustion engine that's causing a resonance in the assembly. Hiroshi translated the explanation to Japanese for his fellow engineers, who were impressed with the precision of the diagnosis. How can we solve it? He asked. By adjusting the timing of the control system by 0.02 seconds, replied Emily. It's a small adjustment in the software, not the hardware. The solution worked perfectly. The vibration completely disappeared, and the engine began to run with absolute smoothness. Emily-san, said Hiroshi, bowing respectfully, you just solved in 15 minutes a problem that our team of 20 engineers couldn't solve in 3 weeks. The news of Emily's feat reached Japan, where executives at Toyota's headquarters were impressed with the young American girl's abilities. It was decided that she would be invited for an exchange program in Tokyo as soon as she turned 18. Back at the university, Emily continued her formal education, but now with a different status. She was no longer just a special student. She was a respected technical consultant, sought out by professors and researchers for complex projects. Emily, said Professor Richard on a Friday, we received a very special invitation. The International Automotive Engineering Congress in Detroit wants you to present a paper on intuitive diagnostics. Me? Present a paper to international engineers? Asked Emily, nervous. With our help in preparation, yes. You have unique knowledge that can revolutionize the way we think about automotive diagnostics. The idea was both exciting and terrifying. Emily, who a year before was asking for water in exchange for knowledge, would now be a speaker at one of the most important automotive engineering congresses in the world. "Professor," she said, "can I ask a question?" "Of course. Why is all this happening to me? Why now?" Professor Richard smiled. "Because talent without opportunity is like a seed without water and light. You always had the talent, Emily. The difference is that now you have the right conditions to flourish. What if I fail? What if people realize I'm not that special after all?" "The fear of failure is common to all great talents," he said. "But remember, you've already proven your worth countless times. The world isn't doing charity for you. It's investing in something real and valuable." That night, Emily called Sarah to share her anxieties and achievements. "Sarah, sometimes I feel like I'm living someone else's life," she said. "A year ago, I didn't know if I would have food the next day. Now I'm being invited to speak in Detroit." "You're living your own life, Emily," replied Sarah, "the life you always should have had. What changed wasn't who you are, it was how the world sees you. Do you think my father would be proud? I'm absolutely sure of it. You're fulfilling the dreams he had for American engineering." And so Emily continued her extraordinary journey, from an invisible girl on the streets to an internationally recognized young prodigy. But there was still one last surprise waiting for her, something that would definitely connect her past to her bright future. 2 years had passed since that first day at Premium Motors Auto Shop. Emily, now 14 years old, had transformed into a confident young woman respected in academic and industrial circles. Her hair was well cut, her clothes were appropriate, and her eyes shone not with desperation anymore, but with determination and wisdom. She was preparing for her presentation in Detroit when she received a call that would change her life forever. It was from a woman with a trembling and emotional voice. "Emily, my name is Helen Wilson. I am your mother." The phone almost slipped from Emily's hands. For 8 years she had believed her mother was lost forever, probably a victim of alcoholism and depression. "Mom?" she whispered, feeling her legs go weak. "Yes, my daughter. I saw you on television, on the program about young American scientists. I recognized your eyes immediately. The same eyes as your father." Helen explained that she had spent years fighting against depression and alcohol addiction after Edward's loss. She had tirelessly looked for Emily, but the girl had disappeared from the social assistance system. Helen came to think she had lost her daughter forever. "Where have you been all these years?" asked Emily with a choked voice. "In rehabilitation clinics, therapy, trying to rebuild myself," replied Helen. "It took me a long time to get sober and stable. When I finally felt ready to look for you, you had disappeared. And how did you find me now?" "Through television. When I saw a report about the young prodigy of American engineering, I recognized not only your face, but also your way of explaining things. Exactly like your father did." Emily was crying, a mixture of joy, anger, confusion, and relief. "Mom, I need to see you. I'm in Chicago. I work as a secretary in an accounting office, and I live in a small apartment, but it's clean and organized. I've been sober for 3 years. Sarah and the Olsen family fully supported the reunion between mother and daughter. On the following Saturday, Helen Wilson arrived in Riverside to meet Emily. The reunion was both emotional and painful. Helen was unrecognizable, thin, graying hair, marks of suffering on her face, but with the clear and determined eyes of someone who had won difficult battles. "Emily," she said, extending trembling hands to touch her daughter's face. "You've grown so much. You're so beautiful, so intelligent. Mom, why didn't you come back that day? Why did you abandon me?" Helen started to cry. "Because I was sick, my daughter, very sick. I knew that if I tried to raise you in the state I was in, I would destroy you along with me. It was the hardest decision of my life, but I was left alone. I went hungry, cold, afraid. I know, and it kills me inside. Every day I think about what you went through because of me. But I want you to know that I never stopped loving you, never." The conversation lasted for hours. Helen told about the years of struggle against alcoholism, the hospitalizations, the relapses, until finally managing to stabilize. Emily talked about her life on the streets, about how she preserved the love for cars inherited from her father, about the people who helped her along the way. "Emily," said Helen, "I didn't come here to take you away from the life you've built. I know that the Olsen family has given you the love and stability that I couldn't give. I came only to ask for your forgiveness and to tell you that I am immensely proud of the woman you've become. Mom, you don't need to ask for forgiveness. You did what you thought was best at the time. And look, I ended up well, and more than well. You are extraordinary. Helen had brought an old cardboard box. I brought some of your father's things that I managed to keep, she said, opening the box. Inside were photos of Edward with baby Emily, some technical documents, medals of professional recognition, and, most importantly, a personal notebook where Edward described his theories about predictive diagnostics. Your father wrote this shortly before the accident, explained Helen. He believed that in the future there would be people capable of talking with machines, intuitively understanding their problems. Emily leafed through the notebook with reverent care. The pages contained not only technical theories, but also Edward's personal thoughts about the future of automotive engineering. On one of the pages, she found a note that made her tremble. Observation, Emily, even at just 3 years old, shows exceptional sensitivity to engine sounds. Did she inherit my mechanical intuition? Should I encourage her? Note for the future. Investigate if there is a scientific basis for hereditary transmission of specific technical abilities. My God, whispered Emily. He already knew. He knew I had this gift. Helen smiled through tears. Your father always said you were special. He said that you would be a better engineer than him one day. The discovery of this notebook represented much more than an emotional connection with her father. Edward's theories about predictive diagnostics were years ahead of their time and aligned perfectly with the work Emily was developing at the university. Professor Richard was fascinated when Emily showed him the notebook. Emily, these notes are revolutionary. Your father was developing concepts that we're only now beginning to understand scientifically. What does this mean? It means that you not only inherited your father's talent, you are the natural continuation of his work. It's as if you were 2 generations of the same research. The revelation gave a new dimension to Emily's work. She wasn't just developing her own skills, she was completing her father's scientific legacy. At the presentation in Detroit, Emily surprised the international audience, not only with her technical expertise, but with the personal story behind her knowledge. She talked about Edward Wilson, about his theories that she was now validating in practice, about how intuition and science could work together to revolutionize automotive diagnostics. My father believed that machines have their own language, she said to the audience of more than 1,000 engineers from around the world, and that some people have the natural ability to understand this language. Today, we're using artificial intelligence to replicate this ability, but perhaps we should also better develop human intuition. The presentation was an absolute success. Emily received invitations from European universities, proposals for collaboration from American and Japanese companies, and was considered one of the most promising young people in world engineering. But the most special moment came when she returned to America. Helen had gotten authorization to spend a weekend with Emily at the Olsen's house. For the first time in 10 years, mother and daughter were together. Really together. Emily, said Helen on the last night of the visit, I want you to know that even in my worst moments, I was always sure of one thing. You would be extraordinary. You had to be. You are Edward Wilson's daughter. Mom, I'm your daughter too. And you are also extraordinary. Look, you overcame alcoholism, rebuilt yourself, found me. That's also a type of heroism. On the last day of the visit, Helen made a surprising proposal. Emily, I know I don't have the right to ask this, but would you like me to move to Riverside so we could be closer? Emily looked at the Olsen family, who had become her family of the heart. Robert and Carla smiled encouragingly. We support any decision of yours, said Carla. You will always have a place here, but we understand if you want to rebuild the relationship with your biological mother. Actually, said Emily, I have a better idea. What if all my family stayed together? Mom, you could live nearby, visit often, be part of our life. I don't want to choose between the people I love anymore. And so it was decided. Helen moved to Riverside, got a job at an accounting firm specializing in automotive shops, and became part of the circle of people who supported and loved Emily. Premium Motors, Richard's shop, had closed in the previous year, Unable to overcome the reputation crisis caused by how he initially treated Emily, John and Carl had opened their own shop, where they practiced more humanized and respectful diagnostics. Sarah had become a partner in an automotive consulting firm that provided services to international automakers. She frequently took Emily as a junior consultant on special projects. 6 months after reuniting with her mother, Emily was back at the university when she received the news that would crown her extraordinary journey. At 15 years old, she had been accepted for a direct doctorate at Tokyo University, focusing on artificial intelligence applied to predictive automotive diagnostics. "It's a unique opportunity," explained Professor Richard. "You would be the youngest person in history to do a doctorate at this university. And I could continue the work my father started? Not just continue, you could completely revolutionize this area of engineering." Emily looked out the laboratory window, seeing the cars passing on the street. Each of them had its own voice, its own problems, its own mechanical personality. She had learned to listen to these voices when she was still a hungry and desperate child on the streets. "Professor," she said, "do you remember what I asked for on that first day at the shop?" "A glass of water." "Exactly. I just wanted a glass of water. And look where that brought me," the professor smiled. Sometimes the greatest journeys begin with the simplest requests. Emily accepted the invitation to Tokyo, but with one condition. She would return to America every year to work on social projects, identifying and helping other children with hidden talents. On the night before her trip to Japan, Emily was at the Olsen's house, surrounded by all the people who had made her transformation possible. Helen, Robert, Carla, Brian, Sophie, Sarah, Carl, John, Professor Richard, all there to say goodbye to the girl who had changed their lives as much as they changed hers. "Dear listeners," said Emily, addressing directly the camera that Sarah was using to document the moment, "I hope my story has inspired you. To follow this emotional account, share your own stories of overcoming in the comments. Find other equally touching narratives on our channel by clicking here. If you like this journey, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like on the video. Every day we bring real stories that show how a simple gesture of compassion can transform lives. Don't miss our next content. We await you in the comments to share your own experiences of when someone believed in your dreams when you needed it most. And so the girl who once asked for just a glass of water in exchange for knowledge became a young scientist about to revolutionize the world's automotive engineering. Her story